We talk about all these great athletes and great experiences, and you know, I've had these great experiences. One of the things that concerns me and has concerned me is how high we put them on these pedestals. My son reminded me a couple of weeks ago what a mistake that was, inadvertently. He says, "Dad, you got to come look at this. I need to show you something. We got a problem here. You made a mistake." And I said, all right, brings me in the computer room. He'd been going through the pictures in the computer. And he says, "Look at that." And I said, "Oh, there's your favorite player, Miggy." That's my kids, Matthew and Allison. "There's your favorite player, Miggy." He said, "Look at this one." I said, "Oh, you Brian Roberts." Miggy left, you love Brian Roberts. And there's Jay Gibbons, you like him too. And he says, "Look at this one." I said, "Oh, you with Jamal Lewis. He was your favorite running back before he left for the Browns." I said, "What's the problem?" He said, "Dad, don't you know?" I said, "What?" He said, "Jamal Lewis went to jail. Brian Roberts and Jay Gibbons, they both cheated and did steroids. Miggy did steroids and lied about it. What are you taking my picture for with all these guys?" But I realized that I'm as guilty of it as anyone else, because we put these athletes on these pedestals, and it's something we have to be careful about, because as Barkley said, we're not role models, and it is something that concerns me because of the role these guys play, and the old cliche that your role models probably shouldn't be the athletes. But I have everyone's role models, and over the years I've said I'm going to ram this down people's throat. I'm going to tell them the stories that they should see and they should hear, and they should be inspired by and motivated and have an understanding of what really overcoming adversity is. Because you watch the news, right? If it bleeds, it leads. It's all bad news, fires, robberies. Why would you watch the news? I don't think we do enough of telling the stories that people need to hear. These are the people that, even though I've interviewed presidents and superstars and all that, the people that I've been most affected by, most people don't know their names. This is a guy, Robert Florio. Some of you might have heard me talk about him. Robert Florio is a quadriplegic artist. He sits there for hours and hours and paints with a paintbrush in his mouth. He broke his neck in a pool accident when he was 14. It's a picture he painted of Jay Gibbons with the Orioles. Befriended him after they met. Designs video games on his computer, even though he's a quadriplegic. Robert Florio, of all the people I've talked about, is the most amazing person I've encountered in 20 years in broadcasting. He has this incredible faith and belief, and he never feels sorry for himself. Robert has designed this incredible artwork. You can see Robert sitting there. The portrait on the right of Babe Ruth, the curator from the Babe Ruth Museum told me it's the greatest portrait that anyone's ever done of Babe Ruth. And Robert did this with a paintbrush in his mouth for months and months. That picture at the bottom, that's not a photograph, okay? It's a watercolor of Ripken's speech at Camden Yards. The people from left to right, Ernie Banks, Jim Palmer. I mean, does that look like Palmer from the back, or does that look like Palmer? Joe DiMaggio and Yogi Berra. This guy did this with a paintbrush in his mouth. He invited me to his graduation party at his house, and I said, I have to take my kids to meet this man and let them see that you can overcome anything that you want. If you ever want to be inspired or have anybody inspired, go to robertflorio.com. And I'll give you that name later if you want. Another story, Dave Stevens. Dave Stevens was born without any legs. Those are feet coming out of his torso. He played 2 years of Division III college football and started and made tackles with no legs. These are the stories that people should hear about. He wrestled for his high school team and won a state championship. He started at catcher for his high school baseball team. I ran into Dave Stevens as he was teaching kids the game of football and the game of life at Earl Campbell's football camp. These are the people that inspire you much more than any athletes. One of my favorite stories that I've had an opportunity to do was Michael McCrary, not Michael McCrary, the football player, but Michael McCrary, the 2-year-old. Because Michael McCrary, the 2-year-old, is much more important than Michael McCrary, this great football player. Of course, McCrary played for the Ravens, member of their Ring of Honor. But before his playing days started, as a youngster in Virginia, he was involved in a major lawsuit. A A private school wouldn't admit him because he was black, so his mother said, I'm suing. She went all the way to the Supreme Court, Bobby School versus McCrary. It's probably the one and only time I'll ever do a stand-up outside of the Supreme Court. But it was powerful. They won. It was a precedent-setting case. I set it up so Sandy McCrary and Michael McCrary could go to the school that she helped integrate. 30 years too late, she returned to the school and saw black kids and white kids playing together and learning together. Her son could not go to that school, but she had the opportunity to be there, and I was a part of that, and it was powerful to see this woman. As a white person, I could never truly appreciate the suffering, the death threats that she had received in the early 1970s. This case, Bobby School versus McCrary, was the equivalent of Brown versus the Board of Education for private schools. After they won that case, private schools and all private institutions had to be integrated. So that was a powerful story. And there are other stories that I've come across. Anyone read the USA Today and the sports page? There must be people. Lacrosse fans, people that are lacrosse fans here. If you read about lacrosse in USA Today, you've read this young man's byline, Eddie Timanis. Eddie Timanis covers college sports. Eddie Timanis, you wouldn't know it, is blind. He's never seen any of the games he covers. This is a love story between father and son. His father designed his life to go to the games with his son and do play-by-play for his kid, so his kid could then write about it in USA Today. We're not talking about a small little rag, and we're not talking about a pity job. Went on to write for USA Today, lives by himself, has been on Jeopardy. If anyone watches Jeopardy, right? You've seen him, right? He was a blind kid on Jeopardy that won thousands and thousands of dollars. So these are the amazing people that I've had an opportunity to come across. And there's one story that I want to share with you that didn't get maybe well, actually it did get a lot of national attention. But in the Jewish community, it was a very important story. It's about a decade ago. I'm sitting in the news office in a meeting, and the news director says, hey, anybody hear about this Jewish Jordan guy? I said, huh? He said, yeah, apparently there's this great Orthodox Jewish basketball player. They call the Jewish Jordan. I said, I got that one. That's me. I'll take that story. So here's a snippet of what, for me, being Jewish, was a very powerful story to cover.